Travel west from the windward isles of the Caribbean, across the mighty Atlantic, and 400 miles off the coast of West Africa, you will make landfall at the Republic of Cape Verde, 10 islands thrust up from the seabed by volcanic action. This is the tale of a visit to the two most westernly islands, Santo Anteo and São Vicente. Santo Anteo is the most exposed to the Atlantic. The volcanic rock that formed the island is used as building materials for the houses and roads. But on the west coast, the force of the open Atlantic takes a heavy toll on these roads. The cliffs rise up from the sea with just a few areas flat enough for habitation. Here there are a few fishing boats, but on many days the seas are too rough for them to venture out of the harbour. High above the town, the local council has a community piggery for the islands to raise their livestock for food. Inland, high on the peaks, small communities grow crops in terraces. Indeed, all over the west side of the island, we found homes built high in the cliffs, with crops grown nearby on terraces cut into the hillside. We saw many dry riverbeds. It was February, and the weather was hot and dry, and yet all over this side of the island we saw water running. Crops were growing. Fruit was ripening. Flowers blossomed. The markets were full of local produce. Where did the water come from? As the sun sets, a mist rolls over the peaks. The moist air from the Atlantic condenses on the cooling rock and forms small waterfalls. The islanders channel this water down the hillside into small holding tanks from which they water crops. But what about the dried out waterbeds? A glance at the weather charts shows high rainfall in the autumn, when low, heavy clouds meet the peaks and torrential rain fills the riverbeds. Most of the year, this dry riverbed is used as a football field. After the autumn rains, the pitch is totally submerged. We got some idea of the depth of the water expected from the height of the roads above the gullies. Some waterways can fill with up to a metre depth of water. This riverbed was being used as a road in the dry season. Others become small market gardens. All these rocks and terraces will be washed away in the floods, and every year, when the level goes back down to a trickle, the islanders will rebuild their plots. The land is so fertile that the crops can grow again and be harvested before the next year's rain. Terraces cut into the hillside above the flood level are more permanent. Some roads to small communities are just mud tracks, but one main road is modern tarmac. The riverbed at its side fills in the rainy season. Traditional farming is carried out on its edges. These crops, along with the livestock kept, are the food supply for the island, with a surplus to supply the other islands. Water, Santo Anteo has in abundance. Energy is a different matter. An archaic power station is still in use until funds are found for modern technology that can harness natural resources such as the wind. Time to move on. We headed east across the ridge to Porto Novo to catch the ferry across to São Vicente. The landscape changed. Few clouds are still heavy with moisture over this part of the island, making the eastern side more arid. The sea around the port was calmer than on the Atlantic coast as we boarded a ferry for a short 1-hour crossing to São Vicente. The difference between the two islands was immediately apparent on reaching the larger horseshoe-shaped harbour of São Vicente's capital, Mindelo. In past centuries, the British used this large harbour as a supply base for their fleet. Indeed, when we arrived, there was a British frigate leaving the harbour after a goodwill mission. Container ships make use of the harbour, and there is a thriving repair and ship dismantling industry at the dockyard. We drove around the coast past sandy beaches on this island made of volcanic rock. Where did the sand come from? Some parts of the year the wind is from the east and sand is blown from the Sahara and deposited on the beaches. A fishing village on the eastern seaboard. The seas here are much calmer than on the Atlantic coast of Santo Anteo, so boats can go out regularly. Fishing is a part of the economy, and fish is a large part of the local diet, with regular supplies bought fresh from the boat. But what of agriculture? We went into the countryside. It reminded us of the eastern side of Santo Anteo. The vegetation was sparse and brown. Amid the dry vegetation, there was some horticulture. But it appeared to be around water pumps powered by the wind. These were few and far between due to the lack of underground water supplies. A trip to Mount Verde, the highest point of the island, illustrated another form of crop watering. Natural mist irrigation. Here crops were grown, but they were very sparse, irrigated by the condensation of the mists that surround the mountain on most days. But how can the towns and their hotels manage for water? Outside Mindelo there is a sewerage works where all the island's wastewater is collected and cleaned for industrial use. But you might ask, what about drinking water? Mindelo has a desalination plant for this. Water is so precious that the so-called greens of the golf course are soil, rolled flat and oiled to give smoothness. What a difference between these two islands. Each had a different tale of man working with nature. São Vicente was given a harbour suitable for commerce, and with it came development. But the island was dry and brown. Santo Anteo became Cape Verde's garden because nature had given it a precious resource, water, and from that had come beauty.